This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm Drew Dixon. I'm the chief content nerd at Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined by Chris Queltney. Hey, Chris.
Hey, what's happening? I'm Chris. I'm the chief executive nerd, and this is Humans of Gaming, where, we get to have all kinds of people on here to hear about who they are as people, what they've contributed to the games industry, whether video games, board games, and we just get to have really open and honest conversations with them, and it's always very enlightening, and we get to learn a lot about not only these people, but sometimes ourselves as well. So thank you guys for being here, and hopefully you get to learn something today too.
Yeah, definitely. Here's a question that I feel like we should ask people more often, especially board game designers who come on this show. But I'd be curious what you think, because we've talked to a lot of them with me before. Mm-hmm. Do you think most of them are trying to make a career out of making board games?
I mean, I think in their heart of hearts or in their ideal scenario, yes. Like if they could just close their eyes and open them and all their wildest dreams be imagined, yes. But what I have consistently heard from many designers and people in the industry is that there is no money in designing games. The money is in publishing. That's what I've heard pretty consistently.
And a lot of the designers we have on this show end up doing that, creating their own publishing houses essentially for board games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of Jamie Stegmaier, I think, is personally one of the most impressive board game designers alive today, but he would tell you the same thing,
Yeah.
And
that's kind of what he did,
like that's what he's done. Yeah. With Stonemaier for sure.
Yeah.
I bring that up because we have a successful, I think, and very skilled board game designer on today, Kirk Dennison, who started Peacekeeper Games.
Mm-hmm.
They've done Rurik, and before that, Gearworks, and before that, Flag Dash, which is like a card game version of Capture the Flag.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Rurik is definitely his most like successful game in terms of its reception and. Like it's hard to get a copy of that game. It's been well reviewed, but anyway, like I just love that he was really honest with us in this podcast about like, I'm not going to ever do this as a job, and so like this is one of those episodes where I think we get to burst people's bubble a little bit.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble completely because I'm like, I want to believe that whole like thing that we were all sold. That you can do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
That's so stupid.
Or whatever. Yes, but it is really dumb.
I currently do what I love, and it still sometimes feels like work.
It's really hard.
Spoiler alert, kids.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really, I think it's good for us to have like a healthy balance of optimism and realism. And I think, Kirk helped certainly shed some light on that stuff of just how much work it really is to support a family. I mean, he's got a wife and kids and, to not only like support their house and team, but also be able to pursue a passion of his, which is making board games, and just the balance and struggle that can be. It's good to know what you're getting into. You can't just wake up and fart out some games and make a bunch of money,
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
I mean, I've done that a couple times, but they weren't great games. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's another thing we talk about towards the end-ish of this that I want to tease out, and that's that we talk a bit about this whole thing that's going around these days of like deconstruction. Because Kirk talks about a time when he struggled with his faith pretty significantly. And so, anyway, I just think that's an important thing for us to talk about these days because, there are people that are struggling with what they believe. And there are some people that are going so far as to leave the faith. And I just always like think, man, if they just how might that story be a little bit different or less painful if they just had people in their lives who are like, hey man, you can talk to me about it and I won't judge you, or you can talk to me about it and I won't tell you you're not a Christian anymore, and you can't be in the club anymore or whatever.
Right.
So,
questions
anyway.
are not scary, gang.
Yeah.
Questions are not scary. And if there's anything I hope that we gain from doing this show where we do ask questions is that questions aren't scary. And hopefully we can show to you, dear listener, that you can talk to people that are different than you and think differently than you and look and act differently than you. And you can ask questions and the answers don't have to be scary.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that you're in a faith community that feels like you can't talk about stuff or can't ask hard questions. And I just want to say, if that's you, like, there are people out there, like, there are, and they're not all atheists or something. Like there are people out there.
You can ask me questions
Jesus.
anytime. Chris at lovethynerd.com.
There you go. Yeah. There are people out there who love Jesus who aren't afraid to help you. And just, I mean, even if you just want to vent, hit me up too. Drew at lovethynerd.com. But without further ado, here's our talk with the designer of one of your very favorite games.
Dude, Rurik is one of my favorite games. It is a blast.
Which may be why we had him on the show.
Yeah, that's right. I contained myself to a point, and then the floodgates opened, and then we moved on.
Hey, Kirk, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Drew?
I feel like I'm doing great. I feel like you're being things could be going better for you, I think.
That was the total Midwest or American.
Well, I'm comparing things to yesterday and the day before and the week before and the 2 weeks before. So, in a comparative sense, I'm doing well. I'm doing better than recent times.
So we're looking at you right now, and you're laid up after knee surgery. Bless your heart for having your video on right now for us. Yeah, man, you're living the dream there.
I'm living the dream.
Yeah, while your wife and daughter are in the hospital, right? Or at the hospital.
I have two twin
daughters,
girls,
right? Twins.
That are in the hospital. Yes. They've been there for the last 10 weeks. They decided they wanted to come into the world a lot sooner than we were expecting them to. And that's been a fun journey of living in the hospital and at home for several months. Plus, we have two kids at home too, which complicates things.
Oh, dang. I didn't know that. I thought these were your first. But did the hospital give you like a BOGO? Because you were already there, like for the girls, they give you like a buy one, get one free on the knee surgery?
Not exactly, but if you know how insurance works, it's mostly free. So you got to pay our insurance plan is such that you pay co-pays for visits. So every time I go for therapy, it's a nominal charge. But yes, all things considered, it's a blessing it happened this year compared to next year, because next year we would have had to pay the full price. Not exactly, but it would have gone towards our dedeductible, whereas
I feel like
we've blown out our deductible this year already.
Yeah, what you said is basically true when you have things like what you've had happen this year. Like it's basically free once you've paid them a lot of money.
Right. So at this point I'm just going to, get a third arm and a tail and all those extra accessory upgrades.
Have them fix everything else in there while they're at it.
Bionic arm. Yeah. Another brain hemisphere.
Kirk, I can barely contain myself because I really want to talk about a really cool game that I love. But before we get to that, can you just kind of frame for everybody why we're talking to you? Why are you on a podcast called Humans of Gaming? What are you doing in the gaming space? How'd you get into that?
Sure.
Tell everybody.
The main reason I'm on the podcast is because I am a human. If I were an elf or a dwarf, I don't think you would have invited me. So, but right now my beard does lend itself more towards a dwarf than a human, so that's, I guess, debatable. Okay. I've been in the gaming space. Let's clarify my gaming life, I guess. As a kid, I decided games were fun. Played lots of video games at an early clip, as early as I had video games back at Super Nintendo. And
how old are you? Are you like 30s?
I'm 31.
Okay. So about the same age.
Played enough to where my parents gave me restrictions on how much I could play video games. I was completely addicted to video games between middle school and 10th grade, where I basically stay up most nights playing video games and computer games.
What was your jam back then?
Oh, I played Madden 2000. The Michael Vick year for Madden was...
Okay.
I played a ton of that.
Yeah.
Played some JRPGs like Golden Sun, some MMORPGs that were online. Actually, really didn't qualify. It's more like a mass multiplayer tank game called Battlefield back in the day. I don't know if anyone ever played that 2D. That game was super addictive, and anything and everything, just everything game related. But I really didn't sleep very much. My parents kept asking me, why are you so tired when you go to school in the morning? And it's hard.
So they didn't know.
I mean, they knew, but they knew I played a lot, but they didn't know how much. I mean, as an adult now, it's like you look back at it is what it is. You did the thing, and my grades weren't terrible.
You're fine. You made it. Look at you now.
But then after 10th grade, I applied myself a little bit more to activities and didn't do as many video games. And so video games kind of disappeared, but board games filled that space. My dad ended up finding it interesting to play board games in middle school as well. So I was playing board games with my family in 7th grade and on, and then I played more later in high school. But all along, I also played CCGs too. And I used to travel around the country to play a card game called Redemption, which was like a Christian version of Magic the Gathering. I actually placed at multiple national tournaments for that, which is pretty fun.
All right.
And
so that was a big enough deal to have national tournaments, huh?
I mean, you're talking 120 people that show up. But I mean, still, I mean, okay. I was the person that showed up at the combo deck where, if you're familiar with combo decks and CCGs, and once you get set, your opponent can't win no matter what they do once you get all your pieces in place. It's not like a traditional aggro deck or anything.
So you were a lot of fun to play against as well.
People hated playing against me. I mean, the main thing is because they knew they would either win and it wouldn't be very fun for them because they're just trying to discard the cards from your hand or your deck that you need that you can't get back easily or at all. Or once it goes off, then you have that massive turn where you're basically taking 15 minutes to get the lock in place and then you walk in for the rest of the points. So yeah, super not very fun for people, but the most fun was building the deck ahead of time, which actually transitioned itself really nicely into making board games because it's the game before the game. It's you're working all these pieces and this elaborate strategy of your deck composition and your odds and things.
Theory crafting.
Yes. So I didn't know I was going to make board games all the way back then, but playing that game, I played it even up until early in my marriage. I got married, and my wife didn't realize how my addictive personality lent itself to games, and I just stayed up late at night building decks online and playing people, and she's like, this isn't going to work, because I was just spending way too much time with this, and I was like, hey, you don't understand, I'm spending like 50% of the time on this that I used to.
You're like, and you're like, it's the Christian version.
Yeah, it's the Christian version. That's right. But when I looked at it, I was like, okay, Bachelor Life, I spent X hours, and I'm spending X divided by 2 now. What are you talking about?
She should be thanking you.
She should be.
How dare she?
I mean, I'm curious, like what made it the Christian version of? You said it's sort of the Christian version of Magic the Gathering. So was it like angels versus demons?
Yeah, kind of. The reason it was a Christian, I mean, every card had a Bible verse on it, but the concept of the game was not to kill people. It was to rescue lost souls, and every player this is kind of interesting, is that every player played offense and defense, so you had a slew of heroes and evil characters, so you got to have your Satan angels and like the demons and your Goliaths that you could block your opponent's Michael the Archangel and Abraham, and you could play both sides, which is kind of interesting, whereas most games like Magic, your creatures are both offense and defense. So it's kind of a different model where you have specifically offensive and specifically defensive characters, and you got artifacts and instants and stuff like that. The game really wasn't very good when it was first created back in 95. Yes, it was created in 95. It's been around for a long time. And then it got a lot better. Pretty cool game. I haven't played it in a long time. I don't think I've played it since 2012 or 20, something like that. But that was way back in the past.
Did you play Magic the Gathering, or or was that like outlawed in your home, and so you had to play this one?
I don't think it was outlawed. It was not just it wasn't a friend of mine. There was one time I did have an experience with Magic that was kind of creepy, but I think it was the people that were playing it were dabbling in some other things potentially. And it just added to this thing of like, this did not feel right at that person's house. And I had that kind of pressure, but every other time I've experienced Magic, I never experienced that. So I'm pretty sure it was just I mean, you could do anything. Like you could go to a party, for example, and people are clean cut and they're using things responsibly. You can also go to a party where people are abusing drugs in the other room and you don't know it. But if you walk into the room where people are doing it, then you get that bad feeling and you're like, now I'm not going to go to parties again because of that. No, but that's not the reason why. So no, it was more of like a positive affirmation to do a thing, and it was cool enough by itself. So, I mean, the artwork was actually really awesome. Some of it was from like comic books too and stuff, and historic religious art. So it wasn't dumb or anything. If it was a dumb game, I probably would have sought out other alternatives. I actually looked at Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, and I was like, that game looks pretty dumb. Pokemon was cool, and I did dabble a little bit in Pokemon.
We just lost 50% of our listener base, or Yu-Gi-Oh fans.
I mean, it's just different art style. Like, it's all preferences. Pokemon looks cool. I mean, I played Pokemon Blue and Red and stuff, but for whatever reason, I didn't like playing the card game.
I didn't grab you, huh?
But I love playing the games. I mean, that was all I did in driver's ed in high school was playing Pokemon Blue, you know.
That's funny.
So I have a history of gaming. Came back to... went to college and kind of forgot about gaming for a couple years while I tried to just do a different mode of life of social activities.
Was that like a because you mentioned earlier some addictive aspects of your personality. So was that college decision where you kind of stepped away from games for a while, like a deliberate thing where you acknowledged that aspect about you and felt like you needed to take a break? Or
I think it was just new life experiences and dealing with some depression and other issues personally that I didn't know how to deal with, and part of that meant just trying different things, and so that meant busying myself doing activities like playing rugby and singing choir and doing all the intramurals possible and things like that. And then,
maybe that's why your knees messed up.
It is. I did tear it. I tore it 11 years ago from rugby in college, my junior year.
Yep.
But anyways, then I think it was maybe my sophomore year in college. I found playing board games again, so it's always been kind of waves. And then after I graduated college, I had a busy travel job and had to put games on hold for a little bit. Then I met my wife, we got married, and I started playing games again. I discontinued the CCG because that didn't work as well for her. Well, the main thing was it wasn't something she was interested in, so it was a solo activity. And then I kept trying all these board games, and there were a lot of sacrificial lambs. I'd play a board game like, this game is awesome. My wife didn't like it. Now she grew up
What's
playing...
an example?
They weren't necessarily all that great if I look back at them, honestly. There was one called Infiltration. That's a pretty cool game, actually, if you've ever played it before, by Donald X. Vaccarino, the creator of Dominion. That it's a push your luck game. You try to go in and steal as much as you can get and get out before you lose. And there's like a threat level, and if the threat level gets above a certain amount, like the security of the building, then everyone loses. And so it's actually really funny that everyone can lose, and probably everyone loses at least a third of the time. It's really funny because everyone's too greedy. You're trying to pocket too much loot. Yeah. Anyway, so they're games like that just didn't register. And whatever. I was trying different things that I thought. I was just guessing. She grew up playing cribbage and other things, and she hadn't been experienced to strategy games where I'd been playing Carcassonne and Settlers and CCGs for 12 years before I met her. So like I had a big leg up on it. So I've been playing a whole subculture of games already. But then finally, randomly, and it doesn't make sense why she liked it, but Dominion was a hit for her. And we then started playing Dominion.
That's the case with my wife and my parents.
Oh, yeah?
Like,
that's the
my
one,
wife
man.
and I started playing Dominion with some friends somehow. And we got really into it. I introduced it to my parents. My parents went out and bought all the expansions and stuff. They actually have now. They have more expansions than I do. Actually, they have all of them. There's still a couple I don't have. I'm a pretty big Dominion fan too.
Love that game.
It's fun. A big part of it's like it's the game that like that caught on with people around me. So it's like, hey, let's play the game you guys like.
Yeah.
If it gets you to the table, like let's play it.
So that was our evening jam. She'd come home. I'd come home from work. She'd come home. She was in physical therapy school at the time, and we'd play Dominion over lunch or dinner. And I sleeved them all. And I'm pretty OCD when it comes to protecting cards, so I had them all sleeved. And if we got too much food on a sleeve, I'd throw it away and put it in a sleeve on the card mid game. But that was the only way we'd play.
You could just eat and then play. You don't have to do it at the same time.
Well, see, we got more game time in that way. We could play 2 games.
All right.
So it was maximizing things.
You'd be so. It would make you so uncomfortable to play Dominion with me because I
eat with Cheetos and
have. Well, no, not that. I do draw the line there. Like when I have people over, if they were eating Cheetos and then playing with my cards, I'd be like, could you wash your hands, please?
Okay.
I draw the line there.
That's good to know.
But I don't sleeve anything, because I like the feel. I just like the feel of like cards outside of the sleeves. I like to be able to like shuffle them easier. And anyway,
no, I get you. The reason I did it though was because we played it so much and we didn't sleeve it, and then the wear showed on the back of the estates and the coppers, and I couldn't. My wife could do it. I couldn't see a card coming and consciously make the best decision because I knew that it was a terrible card. So I was like, I don't want to be clouded by having special information I'm not supposed to have. So I needed to for my own sake. Whereas my wife would be like, just don't look at it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm like highly attentive when I play games, and I can't not see a card you show me. You know?
Yeah.
So we played a ton of Dominion. We must have played the game 150 times, and I'm not exaggerating. I recorded those plays. And then we eventually moved on to other things, which is fine. And then we started having kids, and we don't play games anywhere near as much as we do, but we have a good-sized game collection and a dedicated gaming room. But that's gaming, and I probably talked too long about non-me making board games. But I've been in one way, shape, or form playing games for a very long time.
Nice.
And then how did that transition? You alluded to this a little bit, but how did that transition to you making games?
Sure.
And who do you make games for? What games have you made?
So I just decided one day in 2015 that there were no good capture the flag board games. Basically, Stratego is all you got. And I love Stratego, don't get me wrong, and I'm pretty interested in that game, but it's not accessible for a lot of people. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make a capture the flag board game. Now, backdrop to that is I only ever met one person who had ever made any game of any sort. So it wasn't like I knew anything about the subculture of making board games or even what you do. It was just, hey, I'm going to do it. So the next day, and I'm not kidding, the next day, I cut up some pieces of paper to make a deck of cards for this game concept I had. I grabbed a Blockus board, or Blockus, however you pronounce that game, which works pretty well for prototyping in hindsight, that it's a grid with small enough pieces that you can put pieces on it. And I took a bunch of D6s from, I had a whole big stack of D6 dice that fit perfectly inside of these little slots. So they work well for obstacles or anything. Basically, it was almost like they were designed to be together. And driving to parents-in-law's house for a weekend thing, I was making up the first iteration of rules to a game on the fly in my lap on an hour and 10-minute car. I'm not making this up. It's just super funny. It's like, what was I doing? I mean, it's all in right away. I was like, I'm doing this thing. And then I got back, and within a week, I took a friend of mine who played board games. I'm like, hey, you got to try this out. I made a game. And so he did the first play test with me on this Blockus board, and we quickly iterated from there. So anyways, the first game was called Flag Dash. It was called something different beforehand, but Flag Dash is what it ended up being called. It's a capture the flag game. Think if you were to take Robo Rally, if you know that game, and remove the luck and drop it to 30 minutes. That's Flag Dash. And it just, so there's, the funny thing is sometimes people would debate with me. They say, this is a luck game. And I said, do you call rock, paper, scissors luck? And they would never know how to answer that question because there is no luck in the game. There's a zero luck game, but it's an outguessing game. You play cards secretly face down, and you're locking 2 moves in at a time. So if your first move does not work, your second move is probably not going to help you much. But if your first move does work, then your second move is probably still going to be a valid thing. So almost like if you also think about playing, if you're familiar with Robo Rally, you plan 5 moves in advance. Or some people compare it to Cold Express, but that's really chaotic. And what I mean by chaotic is you don't plan moves in there, you just flip cards from your deck. Whereas in Robo Rally, you get cards locked in and everyone's laughing because you're spinning left all the time when you don't want to. And it's funny, but that is a runaway leader problem. I love Robo Rally, but it can be frustrating for the person who got eliminated. It's kind of like Risk, that they can't play longer.
Yeah.
So I made that game. I hired an artist I went to college with.
What was that? What was that first play? You said you had a friend. You're like, hey, come play this. What was that first play test like? Like how?
He was trying to help me make rules on the fly, and he was kind of challenging me, like, well, why can't you do it that way? And it's like, well, because I said so.
I just think it's interesting because, like, you hear people. We talk to a good number of board game designers. We have a lot of video game designers on this podcast too, but about how different a game is by the time you finally launch it versus how it started, and also just how much iteration there is in board gaming, of like how much it was just, everybody's different, but I was just curious of like, it's your first time making a game. Was it like, I guess it was good enough that you're like, oh, I'm going to keep working at this.
Yeah, the receptions were mixed to start with. It actually stayed very true to its initial design. The main changes, besides cosmetics, were adding a secondary win condition. The primary win condition, if you could picture it and capture the flag, is you get the main flag your opponent's got and take it back to your territory. I think most kids have played capture the flag, at least in our generation, where you find that cloth tied in a tree, someone's defending it, but if you can get it and run with it and get it back, you win. But I added a secondary win condition because it would drag out too long sometimes, was to add kind of a flag football component. And that was my first real gem of realizing that when you're developing a game, that the feedback that people will tell you doesn't tell you what you need to do, but it tells you there's a problem. And the problem was that in some game states, it would take too long and people just felt like they couldn't find a way to end the thing. And at that point, you lose people's attention. So everyone likes whatever games they like, but if you were to double the game length of any game you like, how many people do you lose? You probably start to drop off the attention. Like most games have a sweet spot for that's the perfect length for the game. And so some games, if they're hilarious and silly, that's fine if it doesn't take you 3 hours to play it. But once you Munchkin, for example, I mean, that's a perfect example in my mind that game goes like if you could guarantee Munchkin would last 40 minutes, I'm in. But in my experience, it trends towards 2 hours, and I'm like,
hits that stalemate at the end.
No one can advance to level 10.
This is something I've been reflecting on lately because one of my favorite board games is Twilight Imperium, and oftentimes I have this like meme reputation in our community of like, man, if the game is not more than 4 hours, Chris is not interested. And I came to this realization. I don't like games because they're long. I don't. I like things about them that make them tend to take longer. The reason Twilight Imperium takes so long is all the politicking. It's all the negotiating, all the, talking back and forth and all that stuff that makes that game take 2 or 3 hours longer than it should. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying about like, how do we like almost distill this down into the shortest possible thing and still get the experience out of it that you want to get out of it. Like, I think that's great.
I mean, you even see that happening today with, I don't know if you like sports or not, baseball. They've decided, the people running baseball, that baseball is too long and that people are getting bored with it with the current length, and so they keep implementing rule changes and things to make the game faster.
It's only taken them over 100 years to figure that out, I guess.
No, but it is super interesting though. But like the attention span of the average person goes down every year because TikTok and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's really interesting. I mean, you see that in website design, reduce the number of clicks to get the thing done, and mobile app games about. I mean, the dopamine that goes to your head, the high only lasts for so long, and man, we are so addicted to screens and everything. But I digress. So that game, where was I going with that? We added a secondary win condition that made it so you could pursue something that gives you partial progress. Like instead of it being a get the thing across the finish line, I pick up a colored flag from all 3 of your people, I win. And I can get them at any point throughout the game. But the game stayed pretty close to its initial intent. It ended up landing, this is years down the road, as a 6.2 on BGG, which, whether you think that's good or not, I'd say is pretty solid for a first design when you don't know what you're doing. And
the fact that you made a game and released it is a win. Like, you did it.
Yeah,
Congrats.
I want to say to people who would like give you crap over that rating on BGG to like, hey, you come back when you've made a game.
Yeah, go make a game.
Yeah, actually, I'll read an email. So it's not relevant at all anymore, meaning that no one plays Flag Dash anymore these days. But I got an email out of the blue, and this game's been for a long time. I've never met this person. My family, I got this literally last Sunday. My family and I just discovered the joy of Flag Dash. We love it. My son's birthday is coming up, and I saw you had a deluxe upgrade expansion. Is there any way to obtain it still? You just love stuff like that. It's like, man, that just warms your heart. For all those BGG whatever poo-pooers, it's like, you know what? For the people that love the game, it's the great game for them. And that was fun. So we did that.
What a cool email.
Did that get published, or did you self-publish?
I self-published it. For a hot moment, I was looking to see if anyone published it and realized that, you know what, whatever. I got time. And any game that someone else picks up, it's going to change substantially. I have my vision. I'm just going to do it. So then I spent all my toilet hours reading how to publish a board game on the internet and figured it out in short order. I kickstarted it in spring of 2016, delivered it in August of 2016. And then we quickly sold out our 1,000-unit print run and randomly licensed it to a big company, Ultra Pro, and they reproduced it and made 10,000 units of it. Now, there were some things there. They didn't end up doing much marketing for it. Not that it would have necessarily done amazing things.
Ultra Pro, they do like sleeves and
yeah, they started a games line. Ultra Pro produced it. Actually, it's pretty cool. The Welcome to Ultra Pro bundle was awesome. I got some incredibly sweet swag from Ultra Pro. So when they were whining and dining me to sign my game and republish it, which is not very common to get a game signed by another company after you produce it. The common logic is companies don't usually want that. They took me to their booth and they're like, have whatever you want. I'm not even making this up. They literally said, have whatever you want. And I looked around and said, this is me of a lifetime of buying Ultra Pro products because I think their sleeves are pretty great.
I don't think they knew who they were dealing with there, man. Like,
so I was like, oh man, like push my luck game here. So I was like, how many things are too many things? So of course I got like the metal weighted dice that are totally unnecessary. That they're in like a special magnetic snap case. And it's like a $30 set of dice that I never use them. It's literally sitting on my computer. Because I think it's a sweet, like, just a cool memento of that, and some expensive deck boxes that I never would have bought that are satin and stuff, because I usually bought all the cheapo ones. But anyways, that's cool. So they produced that, and then I had a thought of, hey, I made one game, why don't we make another one? That was pretty easy. In short order, we must have scrapped 5 game ideas within a matter of 3 months that none of them ended up being any fun. And then I think the reality hit me of, you don't usually just stumble upon an idea that's workable, and some of those ideas maybe I'll eventually come back to them because I think the general game conceit is interesting in my mind, but it took us forever to figure out another game. And then that one, once we figured out, was called Gearworks. We just,
when you say us, who do
my
you
wife
mean?
and I,
Okay,
she would be more of a,
so she helped you with Flag Dash?
She did. She helped me with all of it. We didn't have kids before Flag Dash was initiated, but we had our first son a few weeks before fulfillment for Flag Dash started. So Flag Dash technically was our first kid. Yes, Emily, Flag Dash got her before our. Okay, I guess it's debatable. U.S. fulfillment started after Y was born. But anyways, I digress. It's kind of a funny thing. So life changes when you have kids, but when you don't have kids, you have all the free time in the world. Hence making board games. But anyways, the next game we started working on was I was just doing a little bit of this and that with. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever heard this story before, but sometimes you just move pieces around at a table and something feels pretty satisfying about it. And there was just something about some sort of card placement puzzles. If you were to think about something like a Sudoku or something of this can go here but not there. And I tried this, I tried that. Within a span of 2 weeks, I gone from nothing to what was 90% of what Gearworks became, which Gearworks is basically Steampunk meets Sudoku, but it's got a grid, 5x4 grid with numeric restrictions on one way, color restrictions on the other way. So what I mean, for example, is if someone's already played a 3 in one of the rows, you have to go higher or lower in the different directions. And if someone's already played a blue in a column, no other blues can be played in that column. And it's a bit of a hot potato game. You play a card and then you twist it's an area control game. It's abstracted where the last person to play in each row and column gets a thing, and then you use those things, the parts, to build steampunk contraptions. Anyways, that game worked really well from the beginning, and it stayed super true to the initial design. So we went through a bunch of designs that didn't work, and then just had a game like overnight. And so we came up with that game in, I think, February or March of 2017, and I had it on Kickstarter in, what was that? Before Thanksgiving that year. It was like October or something. It was just like a really fast turnaround time.
A year.
Actually, no, it was April. I came up with the game idea in April. So I got it on Kickstarter within 6 months of the initial game design, which is just unheard of. That game has since landed at 6.9 on BGG, and I'm really proud of that game. I think it's awesome. The whole package, look and feel for steampunk. That subculture was super fun to dig into for art inspiration. Art direction. I mean, some people are much better at sewing their own clothes and building contraptions. Kudos to them. I mean, I just found some really sweet architecture, and I got hooked up with a great graphic designer for that project. Yoma.
It looks great, man. Like, I was just looking it up on BGG and like pictures and stuff, and it's just, I mean, steampunk is already like a cool vibe, but yeah, this just looks really good.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. I also liked so it's 5 suits 1 through 9, and so if you make other games that just need numbers and suits, I think it's a really sweet looking deck of cards. So we've I've made my own Lost Cities deck with extras of the cards there. And I love cool. Lost Cities, but frankly, that aesthetic is so boring for me in Lost Cities. So I play it all the time with my Gearworks cards, and I'm like jazzed every time I play with it because I love the aesthetic.
What a mashup. That's cool.
But I mean, I love traditional card games, and so you just sometimes the art can distract you from playing. Like I like Parade, that's a good game, for example, and that artwork works really well in that game. So there's sometimes it just amplifies it, and sometimes it distracts, in my opinion.
What's up, nerd? You digging this podcast? Well, the audio enjoyment doesn't end there. Visit LTNOnAir.com and make LTN Radio your new go-to for the best Christian rock, rap, pop, and indie, as well as our exclusive LTN shows and podcasts, some of which air on the station before they're available anywhere else. Visit LTNOnAir.com to listen now and find the link to our app. Now back to the show.
All right, we need to talk about Rurik because
guys, listen, I've been really waiting so patiently.
I'm sorry, you can cut out all this junk that I came before.
No. This has all been the buildup. The tension has been rising. We're getting to the climax here. So let's talk about Rurik and how this came about.
So Rurik is a 7.8 on BGG. That's the climax there. But
that's the score to beat.
That brings everyone to the yard.
So the thing is, right around the time that I just came up with Gearworks, right around that same time, I played a game of a friend, designer, Stan Kordonsky, and I told him that game was a little bit too big for what I was looking to publish. I'd only work on my own designs. That game has since been published called Lockup. Maybe you've played Lockup before, Role Player Tale. It's actually a really good game. So this is really funny. I told him that Lockup was too big of a game for me to publish. And then a few weeks later, I see another event. It was like a couple months later, and I played what became Rurik. And I felt this game is a lot more than Lockup. Lockup's a cool game. There's nothing against the game. It's just scale of project. Rurik is at least 3 times as big of a project as Lockup was. But I love this game, and I was like, I'm gonna make.
What did you love about it? Like from seeing that first prototype, or like what were the things that stood out to you?
The worker auction was incredible. So if you haven't played the game, we coined the term auction programming, not action, auction programming. This is like Flag Dash on steroids, and that's what also appealed to me from it, that I don't get into Flag Dash too much more, but the core mechanic of Flag Dash, which was a pretty innovative twist, if I do so, some of the stuff I came up with, involved actions that you weighted with the numbers that you wanted to play. Almost think like Raptor, where your numbers are, the later numbers give you more things, but if you don't know if they're going to happen in the right order, because if someone goes before you, you get hosed. Anyways, same thing is true in Rurik, though, from a perspective of you get more of a thing or you can go first, but you can't get both usually unless you pay a bribe. And so you've got a number of actions you can take, and you're trying to allocate, pre-plan them in a way, and your opponents only have a partial view of what plan you're trying to get at. So I just love that open information. There's very little hidden information in the game, but you're trying to show when you are going to commit to things publicly, and you don't have to do them, but the opportunity cost is you do them or nothing. And that I could not get that out of my head. So I called Stan up and I said, hey, could I help you play test your game? Didn't want to commit to publishing it because he knew I'd told him Lockup was too big of a game. And I play tested that thing 7 times in a week, which is a lot. And everyone I played it with, I don't know if they liked it as much as I did, but every play I kept falling more and more in love with that. And I called him back and told him I wanted to publish it. And he's like, wait, you're kidding me, right? That's not exactly what he said. There was actually another publisher, a legit publisher, that was very interested in the game and wanted to sign it. And I swooped in and convinced him that I was the person that should publish it instead of this established publisher. And
who was it? Are you allowed to say?
I don't think I should say the name of it,
right.
but you could probably. I wouldn't say it.
It rhymes with Anti-Semite Hames. Fantasy Flight.
No, not
right?
that one.
No, I'm just kidding.
Anyways, it's interesting. It's just more funny. I think it's funny that there was someone else who's a big player that wanted this, and I came in my energy. I mean, the other company probably has tons of projects, and I didn't really have anything, so I was able to be like, yep, I'm going to pour myself into this thing.
Yeah.
And then we're off to the races, so that was also that was also April of 2017 that I signed that. So I went from having no projects, couldn't figure out a project, to 2 projects at once. And I convinced my wife, Lord bless her, that I was going to commit 18 months to a ton of time making board games on the side job, making board games, just to see if we could give it a swing at making board games a full-time job.
So did you still have a day job at that point?
I started a day job. So Flag Dash didn't make us really any money. I mean, by the time everything was said and done, even getting royalty checks from Ultra Pro, we barely made anything up. But anyway, so I viewed it like a master's degree. I told her that. I said, it's like an experiential degree here. I'm going to need to spend at least 20 hours a week on this to give it a good go. So I was working like 70 to 85-hour weeks between my day job and making games for...
And what was your day job?
Healthcare analytics.
Oh, okay.
So I jumped in way hard to that, and most nights I was up till 3 a.m. working on stuff, just trying to keep the ball moving and everything. So Rurik, if you're not familiar with that game, so it's a $90 MSRP. Scythe would be a good comparison as far as the type of components that are in the box. Miniatures, so there's 70.
Dude, some of the best like production, man. Like I just opening that box is so satisfying because it's just works. It just works. And okay, now I'm just going to gush a little bit, okay, because I just got to get out of my system. Like this game came out of absolutely nowhere for me. I'm not super dialed into Kickstarter because as you have admitted, I also have an addictive personality. And so it's the same reason I'm never going to go to Vegas, because like if I step foot on a casino floor, I'm going to be face down dead in a ditch the next morning. Like I don't want to do it. So I'm not doing Kickstarter. So like we went to Gen Con, we took a team to Gen Con with Love Thy Nerd. And I think you were in touch, or somebody was in touch with, I don't know if it was Bubba or Matt or one of our other staff.
Yeah, Bubba.
And you know, we worked out a thing that we were going to demo Rurik at the convention. And I just kind of heard that, like I wasn't really dialed into it or whatever. And one of the nights we were there, and, you know, it was after the show floor closed. And so everybody was just kind of chilling out. And one of the guys had a copy of the game and like, oh, do you want to learn this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Whatever. It looks cool. And dude, like I was blown away because it is it kind of goes back to this time thing for me, because it's the kind of game, and this is the kinds of games I love, is that on your turn, it's a very simple sort of thing that you're doing, right? But strategically, there's a lot of depth. So mechanically, at least in my opinion, easy to get, easy to understand, easy to know what to do. Strategically, a lot of depth and a lot of paths to victory. And that's what Rurik is to me. It's a game dude, if everybody knows how to play it, you can easily finish it in an hour and a half. And dude, it's just the inserts, the trays, the pieces to it, like the design, the art, like even the setting. Dude, I didn't know freaking clue about that historical setting. Most people don't, but like, it's cool. It's just, everything about it is like, dude, that game will live in my collection till the day I die.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, though. What I strive for in making games is I don't like the game being complicated because the rules are complicated. I want people to know the rules and not feel frustrated that they don't know how to play. I'd rather them feel like they lost because their opponent played better, not because they forgot 3 rules.
Yep.
And
I
can really enjoy, like, this sounds silly or whatever, because I'm pretty competitive, but I can really enjoy a loss when it's clear afterward, like, oh, I probably would have had a chance to win if I had just done X, Y, or Z.
Right.
I enjoy that because it's like you learn something.
Right. Not that you just forgot something.
Right. Yeah. Or you lost because like you just really didn't. That's the most frustrating way to lose is when you lose and you feel like you don't know why. You have no clue or like you don't even really understand the game you just played. Like you never really like delved into it, you know?
Yeah, so we really focused on streamlining the game a lot in playtesting. We removed exceptions to rules. There really are maybe only 2 exceptions, period, in the game, and they're because they created situations that, in our minds, rose to the level of warranting an exception. But I know a lot of other games that I play them, and I feel like they didn't need that exception. That's fine. They made that decision. But some people have even said to a fault, they say, Rurik is too streamlined. I'm like, whatever, that's our whole point.
Yeah. What does that even mean? Too streamlined.
Not that I thought that it was going to be this big time thing, but there was a thought that people early on sometimes said, oh, it's kind of like Catan meets Risk. And I said, yes, exactly. That's a great compliment. And if people that had played with Catan and played Risk were looking for the next level up, I recommend Rurik 100 times out of 100 to that concept of people, because you have a game with, it isn't about war, but you're trying to move troops around and conquer areas. Mm-hmm. You can coexist. And then you're trying to manage your resources. There's no trading, but it has that type of feel to it. But there's a determined game length compared to Risk that takes 8 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was quite the experience to produce that game, and been super happy with the end product. And we just produced a second printing of it and an expansion that are just starting to hit backers around the world as of the time we're recording this. U.S. backers will get it in a couple weeks as well.
That's rad. Nice. Yeah, man. And like you said earlier, too, the thing that stands out for me with Rurik is the auction. What'd you call it? Auction programming?
Auction selection.
Yeah, that's just such a cool. I've never seen it in another game. I've seen games do those two things separately. I've seen like an auction thing, and I've seen like a programming thing, but like the way that it's done together, and it's so snappy, and like it just works. I love it. Drew, you haven't played it?
Thank you.
I could have swore we've played it.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't played it. Yeah. Oh. I know our team demoed it a bunch, but I was on like a different team when we did that at Gen Con.
We need to play it, man.
And so, yeah, I've never gotten to play it, but
you'd like it a lot.
You're saying all the things that I like to hear about games that I like.
Because that's Scythe too. Like really I think the Scythe comparison is very apt, because that's a thing where on your turn, you're doing one thing and it's very clear and simple, but the strategy behind Scythe, the 400,000 different ways you can win a game of Scythe, like that's the depth of it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I will draw a line in the sand on the difference between Scythe that I see in particular, because there are some people that don't like Scythe because there are more exceptions in the rules for Scythe. Scythe is a 24-page rule book. Yeah. Rurik is, before you get to solo rolls, is only 7 pages, and it has a lot of images in there, so it's more easy to get, and there's reference cards that make it fairly straightforward.
I was pulling Rurik up on Boardgame Geek, and I was actually really surprised. I'm curious if you agree with this, that it has the weight at a 3.10 out of 5. I was really surprised that it's at that weight. Like, it should be lower. It's
high or low?
Yeah, I think it should be lower.
Yeah, I think what happens is sometimes people will say, and I love this complaint of games, it lends itself to analysis paralysis. I just laugh and say, that's just your game group.
Yeah.
I have played the simplest games in the world with people that tend towards analysis paralysis, and it doesn't matter what the game is.
Yep, that's true.
No, but I don't see it's all kind of subjective.
That's true.
I see where people are coming from. It's not dominant species level. If you're familiar with that game of pre-planning, oh man, that's a real brain. It works your brain a lot, but it's all, what are you comparing it to? So actually, if I'm saying it's a step up for people from Catan and Risk to that, then it is going to be a 3 out of 10 for them. If they're playing all the Lacerda games or something, then it's probably more like a 2.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. What's the so now you're doing this full time? You're doing board game? No, okay.
No, actually, it's
sort of hinted at that.
No, we tried to make it a go. It didn't end up being enough to be replacement income for a family, and so then I spouted into a year of depression, trying to come to reality with the fact that I couldn't work games full time, and I didn't really like my job, and made a career change, and thought I was just kind of, I don't know what I was going to do with games. And then we had the opportunity to make an expansion for the game, and we've made an expansion, but actually now with 4 little kids, making games is going to be a rear view mirror type of thing. We don't have any free time to make board games now. So
yeah. Oh man, I'm sorry. But
no, it's nothing to be sorry about.
Are wonderful. So
yeah, 4 kids 5 and under. The thing is, this sums it up pretty well. When my 5-year-old asks me about once a week to play Rurik, and currently I have to tell him soon, and I've never had the chance to teach a 5-year-old. No, he's kind of young for it. But that's when I don't have the time currently to teach my son how to play the board game that I've made. There's a problem there, and that's the problem is I have too much time committed to finishing making games that I can't even play my own games with my own kids. So that sums it up right there. That I need to give them more space and time, and love playing games and doing other things with their kids. And maybe down the road we'll make games again. But I've not signed up for anything, not making any promises to anyone, and I am happy with that decision.
Well, I think it speaks to like I always like to ask these questions because I think a lot of people, they'll hear people come on this podcast and they're like, that's the dream, man. They're just making games full time. They're rolling in it. And, their Kickstarter that raised $300,000, they pocketed all of that and they are just living the dream. And so we always try to ask those questions because it's like, that's just it's not reality, guys. Like so many people out there
very rare
are
in the world of board
grinding,
games.
grinding.
If you have a spouse who works and brings in health insurance, that brings in over $20,000 a difference for you. But if you are a sole income provider, as I am in my family, that it's a pretty high price tag for a family of 6 to make it work for us.
Yep, for sure. I know that feeling. I'm a family of 5. And I think one of the things people don't realize, I mean, if you listen to the show enough, you probably do, but it's such a difficult space. Like it's just not, board gaming is in this sort of renaissance right now, and it's growing incredibly in popularity, but it's still nothing like video games in terms of like what
monetization,
the market for it. Yeah. And also just saturation. There's so much more expensive to produce and to print. Like, I mean, your print costs on video games these days are super low because half the time you're not printing anything.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're not printing anything. Most people are buying them digitally, but it's just a different world. And I think it's really difficult to, there's very few, there's like, I think your story is pretty common, actually. There's a lot of people. I think I'm just trying to dash some people's dreams, really, by saying this. To crush a few people's dreams.
Pour that bucket of cold water.
But like we know some people that have made some really, really cool, awesome, like very well received games. Some of them are even quite successful, and they're not doing that full time. I mean, they can't. Yeah. That's just the reality, sadly.
That's true.
So
and
I appreciate your like realism.
Yeah, happy to always dash people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to do that now than later, and when they've made a decision to quit a good job, and harder to get that job back later.
Yeah.
No, I've shed many tears in the past over it and been stressed over it in the past, but I'm past that now. The reality is.
Is this just the pain meds talking, though? Is this just the pain meds talking?
I do have a lot of pain meds over here, but actually I've kind of lapsed today. I should have already taken the next dose, so no, this is actually me speaking right now.
You're totally lucid. Totally lucid for the podcast.
I am, but later I'll be a little bit
what the exception is? The exception is if you can come up with like a really accessible party game.
That's
like,
true.
Just pop culture-y kind of...
Yeah, like Cards Against Humanity or something like that.
Yeah.
Like Vlad, however you say his name, Vlad Shivatil.
Vlada.
From Czechs. Vlada.
Oh, sure.
He's made so many cool games. Like
cashing those code names checks all the way to the bank.
But the game that like made him was Codenames, and he came up with that like at a party one time. Like he was at a party and was like, oh, here's a word game we could play. And he kind of came up with it on the spot. And that's the game that's actually made him financially successful, Yeah,
I didn't realize that's how he came up with it, but it makes sense. Yeah, I will probably always be quote unquote creating games. I mean, the main thing is when you have kids, you always create variants to the rules for more complex games to teach it to them. And the other thing is that when you play games with people and they don't have fun with the game, I will sometimes change the rules mid-game to make it a more enjoyable experience for people. So that's just, in my mind, just life. You're just trying to make people enjoy the play experience.
All the rules lawyers listening right now just literally jumped out of their skin when you said that.
I have done that for couples that played games with us before, and I realized that for one of the other couple, it was a miserable experience. And I got the visual buy-in from their partner that they were okay for a change, and my wife is go with the flow, and it's like, all right, we'll throw that rule out the window. Like, you've been playing the game wrong the whole way because you thought that's how the game was played. We'll finish the game that way because it'll make your experience better than you having wasted all this time.
For sure.
I used to be all rules lawyer and stuff when I played CCGs, but oh no, these days it's all about you got to have fun. Life's too stressful.
Yeah, just have fun. Yeah,
just enjoy the game.
I mean, that's the point. Yeah, pretty sure that's the
agree.
point of games.
It's just an experience.
So where do you live now?
Live in Wisconsin.
And where did you grow up there?
No, I moved here after college.
Okay, where did you grow up?
I've lived in 10 states, and I grew up in Maryland and Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so military family, or
No,
why
my
did
dad's
you
a pastor.
have you lived in 10? Oh, okay. Oh, so it's church to church
Basically military family.
kind of thing.
Pretty much, except that in the military you can be honorably discharged, and in churches you're excommunicated. So.
Hey, there's a story
So
there.
Excommunicate? Yeah, we have to.
So you're PK.
No, not
we got
exactly.
a PK in our midst here.
No, but
Pastor's
it's
kid.
more of a just a joke. But
So what kind of churches was your dad a pastor of?
mostly Baptist churches, Southern Baptist churches, some non-denominational churches. He actually planted a church in 1997. And funny storybook ending. It's not ending, but currently, a month ago, or it was 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, he's now the pastor of our current church. He moved from Florida to Wisconsin to assume the senior pastor role at our Evangelical Free Church in Wisconsin.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So you're like,
Is
hey
that-
guys, my dad could do this.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was like. And people looked at me like, okay, when everyone's like, yeah, my family member does that, people just roll their eyes. It doesn't matter what the thing is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's like, I don't know, I'm just going to name drop something random here. I don't know if Adele has a brother, but could you imagine if Adele's brother just, oh, yeah, my sister's a famous singer, and people are like, yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, bud. Yeah.
But no, yeah, so grow up every Sunday you're in church unless you're deathly sick, and you go to all the other activities in between.
What was that like for you? Like, did you, I know there's like a lot of, because obviously you're in church now and stuff, you hooked your dad up with a sweet gig at your current church.
So I get a percentage of a salary. It's kind of
That's
nice.
right. A percentage of the tithe.
But a lot of like, I
you
think
get a
it's
tithe
a
of the
unique,
tithe.
yeah, it's a unique experience for a lot of preachers' kids. Like it can be tough, and a lot of them like have a hard time with it and
Yep.
don't really like kind of want to cut ties with the church. But I guess, did you never do that, or did you ever have a time where you were like, man, this stinks being the preacher's kid, I'm out? What's your journey been like?
Yeah, it's tough. PKs and missionary kids, PK mean pastor kid, MK missionary kids, both have this experience of you're either in or you're out. And I went to a Christian school, and I knew a lot of people that were pastors' kids or missionaries' kids there, that they lived their wild life after they got to go out of their parents' grasp. And there's probably lots of factors in each individual situation, but it unfortunately seems to just breed extremes. And the reality, I think, is that ministry, when I'm talking about ministry, for those who might not be understanding what I mean on the podcast, working generally in a vocational setting of spiritual nature, there's extra things that play in the background that are often hard to quantify, but they do play into things. And what I mean is there's spiritual warfare and extra stressors and a lot of pressure being put on you internally and externally to perform well in that, because if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, people's souls are at stake. And so all of a sudden, it's not like, oh, yeah, somebody's making money at our company. There's a lot of extra stress that goes into everything you do. And so your specific question of did I ever abandon the church or give up on it or whatnot, I very lightly alluded to that. Coming out of high school, going to college, I tried to reinvent myself a bit. I had left a really unfortunate ending to a church that my dad was a pastor at, and I had kind of gone. I think that I didn't make any really bad decisions.
He had a bad experience.
It was a really bad ending there, and I, for lack of better words, let myself go. Now, thankfully, I didn't do a lot of stupid things. God protected me from totally ruining my life. In a similar set of circumstances, I've known other people who have made a lot of worse choices than I did. The extent of my worst choices were focused on isolation, depression, not talking to anybody, staying up all night, doing anything and everything mindlessly, drinking lots of soda, busying myself, not trying to make deep friendships, but just busy, not think about anything, just numb the pain.
Which can be like, that's like, I mean, you say you didn't get into anything really bad, but
well, I did get into
that trajectory. That trajectory is really bad if you stay on it, It
is bad to stay on it. But meaning like I came out of it before I made decisions that were not irreversible. And the main challenges I had with drinking so much soda is I go to bed without brushing my teeth because I just said, whatever. And I had tons of cavities in my teeth from a single semester in college that I, 12 years later, still literally pay the price with now starting to get crowns on my teeth and stuff that I can't recover the damage that I did to those teeth. It's just been a waiting game. And
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, I abused soda. And that sugar just destroyed my teeth in a short period of time. But no, I distanced myself, and I didn't really want to do much with the church. But I didn't give up on God. He definitely didn't give up on me. I conveniently, going to college, just tried a bunch of churches and didn't commit to any of them. And my mom eventually said, you just need to pick a church. It doesn't matter where. Just go somewhere. They need your help. You can plug in and do something there, and you have more familiarity there, and you'll get more out of it if you go somewhere regularly. And it didn't happen until partway through my sophomore year that I actually picked somewhere to stay, but that was in the back of my mind. And I had no friends because I was choosing to isolate myself, and I had lost friendships from the church fallout from before. So it was a difficult time in life, and God really gave me a lot of latitude before finally saying, all right, enough of your pity party. Get over yourself and realize there's people who care about you in life, and you just need to give them a chance. And I'm willing to be your friend. In fact, I've always been your friend, and you just didn't want to deal with me. But he said, I'm your friend, and I'm going to show you friendships a little bit at a time. And I prayed for one friendship my spring of my freshman year in college because I had no friends. And if people who went to college with me heard me say this, yeah, I maybe looked like I had friends, but I was just faking it because I just didn't. I was hurting so much inside. I wanted to interact with everybody, but I didn't want to get to know anybody. I didn't want anyone to get to know me. Just the honest truth. And then God brought one friend into my life my second semester, someone who was very intentional with me and sought me out and pursued a friendship. And it was the next year God brought one more friend, and the next year one more friend. And it was not like I had tons of friends all of a sudden, but I had friendships, and I had no friendships prior to that. And it was sweet to see how God was just slowly instilling truths to me and individual encounters with one person at a time. And then I built upon that in those seasons. And the sad thing, kind of on the flip side, is maybe it's not sad, bittersweet, is that those same friends that God brought in for that season, I'm not even on talking terms with a few of them for different reasons or another. But that is almost besides the point. Like, God had them there for that season to pour into me when I was unlovable and I was not willing to be, I call it being real. I wasn't willing to tell people that, hey, I struggle with fill in the blank. I'm depressed. I am angry at a person who did something to my family and I can't let it go. And if I saw the person, I would beat them to a bloody pulp. Like, that's what I felt like inside. And I just didn't let that go. I didn't give that anger to God and ask for forgiveness. And I needed to forgive that person who wronged my family. And it wasn't until I could, out of those words, you have friends who model good behavior and healthy ways of dealing with stress and conflict. And that was my fallout from church, so to speak. So I was probably relatively out of the church mentally for almost 2 years, from Christmas time of senior year at high school to a couple years later.
I think that your story is really instructive, just in the sense that I think like I think the church in the West, anyway, this isn't the case in other parts of the world, but the church in the West right now is really struggling. A lot of people are leaving. Most churches in the Western hemisphere are not growing. And so we're in this place right now where lots of people are like rethinking their faith. There's this real popular phrase that everybody's throwing around, deconstruction, and like nobody, I think there's this assumption amongst a lot of Christians that what you need to be able to do for your friends who are quote unquote deconstructing or struggling or like something like that's going on in their lives, what you need to do is know how to answer all their questions and all the things that like we think of it from a theological perspective or something, but I think probably more often than not, the thing that's most powerful in people's lives who are going through like shifts or struggles or not wanting to be in the church is like friendship. Like that's what we all need. Like we need people who are going to be like, hey, I'm here and I care about you. And we can talk and
can speak from personal experience My wife and I both went through sort of a deconstruction 3-4 years ago, and I would say are still in it at some level for different things. It's not a to B kind of process.
Sure.
But when we were really in the thick of it, when it was really starting and we were very disoriented and the cognitive dissonance was in full effect, I think you're absolutely right, Drew. Like there were plenty of people that wanted to give us all the answers to our questions and things like that. And none of that was helpful or useful. The only thing that were safe places to be an absolute disaster, safe places to ask any question. Nothing was off limits, safe places to just exist and be. And, thankfully we found the church that we're a part of now, and we found some online spaces and different content creators, like places where it was safe. And so I absolutely agree with you and can say that from experience.
Well, I'm glad you've been able to come out on the other side, or at least mostly.
Oh yeah, I'm perfect now.
I can tell by that glow on your skin, you get that perfect and the halo comes out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just those hernias.
We did it, guys.
We should get rid of those.
We figured it out. So if you need the answers, just email me, chris@lovethynerd.com. Be happy to share with you.
No, but life's such a journey, and you can deceive yourself to think that everything's going to remain the same way it's going to remain now for forever, for good or for worse. And there's so many life factors that change your perspective on everything. So I could factor in more recent learnings from that in a church environment, that then you go to a church where you are more plugged in post college, and we were loving it and happy to be there, but then high turnover because people are transient in an area and they just go other places, and then all those friendships that you poured into are no longer there, and then that's a gut wrench of now you're restarting with the next flight and all the people you're in Bible study with and all the people you serve with, and it feels like an entirely different church. Even though it's not entirely, but the people you're close to are all gone, and that's kind of a deflating way of viewing it. I mean, that's more of a selfish, this is what I want out of church view, rather than what's God doing with this in the here and in the future, and what did I learn, and what did they learn, and what are we being equipped for in the next season to come. But every season brings its own challenges.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, and that's man, I just wish I could spread that message more. I guess I don't know how to do it, but one of my good friends actually, who helps lead Love Thy Nerd, posted on Facebook recently and was just like, hey, what are the questions that you have if you're not a Christian, or if you're like really struggling with your faith and are not sure, or like where you're at and stuff. And that's the thing I wanted to tell all the people that were commenting on it. There were all kinds of questions, but a lot of it was just like kind of what Chris said, of like feeling like you couldn't talk about things that you were unsure about or frustrated with. It's like, that's the message I want to figure out how to spread more, as like, hey, it's okay to have these questions, and it's okay to be unsure. And if more churches were just like places where everyone felt like they could open up. Yeah. Vulnerability, I think, is what we need more of. And I don't know how we do that, but it's important, tough. I think.
I've been taught that the easiest way to champion that or foster that is to get other people to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable yourself, which is true to an extent, but I've been in Bible studies with people for months and months and months, and then where I've been modeling vulnerability and sharing stuff, and they're still clammed up. And what you don't realize is for some people that the sin they're trapped in, the family situation that's plaguing their mind is just so pressing that it might take them forever to get out of it.
Yeah. There's so many factors at work there. Like,
And I fast forward in some of those specific people's lives, and now I know what I know that I didn't know then. And you're like, oh, it makes sense that they still didn't want to share.
All clicks together.
All right. So there's some people I need to call after this. That's good.
How long do you typically let these podcasts run for?
About an hour. So we're getting close here. I do have one more question about kind of your background and experience and stuff.
Sure, and that wasn't meant to cut it off. I just knew that took forever at the beginning, and I apologize.
No, yeah. So, so I'm guessing like you've spent several years now without your dad being your pastor, and now he's back being your pastor again.
Yeah, he hasn't.
What's that been like? Like,
So
you're like more of an adult, I guess.
So he came back, of course, with us in the middle of our girls being in the NICU, which is a real blessing to have my dad and mom close now to help with that. So it's a different time. I'm more detached from helping at church than normal because I physically don't have hours in the day, or right now with my knee surgery, the physical ability to get there to do stuff. So it doesn't feel like it's actually happened yet, but I'm much more clued into what other people are doing at church. And that's not necessarily negative. It's just that if you're a pastor, you're talking to everybody in the church. That is your job. They're not all your coworkers, but that's kind of what it's like. So I hear the exciting news more regularly about other people at church that I wouldn't hear otherwise, and I hear more about prayer requests from other people. And it's not like it's gossip. It's things that are appropriate to share with other church members, but I just have more visibility of things quickly, and it's funny. And I know that in a heartbeat, they're going to laugh, my wife and I, with the amount of information that they know about each person in the church, because they're both really, really good at it. And I generally struggle to remember people's names just in all phases of life, and they're really good at remembering people's names, so they're going to lap me on that. They're like, oh, so-and-so, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. But it's been a long time since my dad was my pastor, since I was a senior in high school, so it's good 15 years.
Yeah.
So learned how to church for longer than I would consciously have been churching. You know, when you're born, you don't really realize what's going on until a certain age. So it is interesting to come back full swing, and it's sweet, though. I know where he stands theologically. I don't have any qualms with his theological stance, and I agree with practically all of them, which is really encouraging. Then when someone preaches a message that if you know their theology in the backdrop, you're not questioning why they're saying things a certain way, and you give more grace to if something comes across like a hot take. Maybe I don't always do this the right way, but every church I've gone to, I have met with the pastors after a choice sermon or two, and I've said, hey, just curious, I heard this thing, and I don't know what you meant. Can you help me understand? I just don't want to put words in your mouth. And in almost all cases, I was putting color into it that wasn't there, and it was a helpful conversation. The pastor at each instance acknowledged that, you're right, I could have probably worded that in a different way that wouldn't have let room for the imagination to run.
Yeah.
So those were a helpful conversation. Each time the pastor said, I really appreciate you coming to me one-on-one and asking for that. But there is a comfort level then if you know what the pastor's thinking at a more intimate level, because you've had someone mentor you like my dad has for years. That's real sweet.
You should have done, instead of talking to those pastors one-on-one, is you should have taken to Twitter and just absolutely roasted them on Twitter. Yeah, just roast them.
Yeah.
Next time.
Well, your dad
you do that with your dad. The next time your dad preaches a sermon that you hate, you just hit him up on Twitter.
He just makes jokes about my mistakes from over the years in front of everybody on the stage. It's fun. Real fun. Yeah, perfect.
Well, he must be a decent pastor if you would recommend him to the church you were attending.
Oh, yeah. Wholeheartedly. He's a great pastor. He's really good at discipling and encouraging spiritual growth.
Yeah. I was a pastor for a while, but I haven't been in 6 years now, something like that.
Oh, wow.
But I wonder now that my kids are older and stuff, because we had Evelyn is my oldest, she's 10, so she was 3 or so when we left the church that we were at, and I didn't leave. It was a great church. I didn't leave on bad terms at all. I left on really good terms. It was just a job change for me and things. But I wonder now what they would think about me. You know what I mean? Because your kids are they know you really well, better than anybody else, really.
And they get to hide anything.
So anyway, but glad to hear it's going well. Anything else you want to we're kind of out of time here. Anything you want to? I know you said you're kind of taking a break, and maybe we won't make board games for a long time because of the stage of life you're in, which we totally get. But anything you want to plug or tell people to look up? I know you've got the expansion for Rurik, right?
The expansion for Rurik. The kind of the sad thing about any publicity for it right now is we're sold out of the base game, and we have literally a handful of copies left of the expansion. And with the amount of time, it takes a lot of time to even manage just a reprint. I can't manage that. So there's other retailers that have purchased copies, but they are hard to get games. So if you were on the fence about buying a copy of Rurik, you should probably secure a copy with your retailer that you can find that has it sooner than later. If you want an expansion, we've got just a few of those. You can buy it from us. Besides that, though, I would say that I'll probably still be around to some extent. I do some consulting on the side for a number of game companies. So if you are randomly interested in game consulting help, I've got my wife's buy-in that I like consulting. And if I do a couple hours here or there to help people with their projects on a small paid amount, then I feel like I'm making a difference in helping people to avoid mistakes that I've made. And I do consulting on some different bases for different publishers in the industry.
Cool. So where can people find you if they want to reach out? Twitter or
best way to reach me is my Peacekeeper Games email. I'll still keep it running because why not? Games, GAMES at Peacekeeper Games. That's a play on words. PIECE Keeper KEEPER Games plural @.com. So games at peacekeepergames.com. I really don't like Twitter or Instagram, so if you reach me on those platforms, I might not get back to you very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, none of us really like it.
No, who
Even
actually
the people
like?
that are really invested.
I don't even like Facebook. I just do it because it's the cost of doing business. People post on there asking for replacement parts. It's like, well, you didn't follow the instructions to go for emails. But
weird, people not following instructions.
I like posting things on there every now and then, but then I don't like how they make me feel inside. So,
yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. Happy to chat with you.
Kirk. This was great.
Yeah,
Drew and Chris.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks for sharing so much and being so open.
You're welcome. And I'm glad you have enjoyed playing Rurik, Chris, and Drew. I forgive you in advance for not having played it before.
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to try and find a copy now because of y'all's description.
I'll sell you mine for $300, Drew. It's a collector's item.
I thought you said it was never going to leave your collection.
That's true.
There's a price on everything.
We just discovered what that price was.